Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode in the Women Leading Boldly Summit. I am thrilled today to be talking to Viktoria Hamma. She is a biopsychosocial wellness practitioner, and she'll tell us a little bit about that in a minute. Her expertise spans across chronic pain management, stress reduction, mind-body medicine, and emotional awareness. And her unique perspective is born from both rigorous study, but also her personal experience in overcoming chronic pain, trauma, and burnout. And so I was really excited about having her on and her perspective. And she's also the author of a groundbreaking book that we'll also hear about called The Middle Path. And she offers a compassionate and balanced approach to wellness. And balance for me is personally something that I advocate for 100%. And that's why I was so excited to have her on. And her work deeply rooted in biopsychosocial model, which recognizes the intricate interplay between biological, psychological, social, and emotional factors in health and wellness. So, Viktoria, welcome. So happy that you are here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Excited.
All right. So let's dive in, set the tone for our listeners. Can you define what exactly is biopsychosocial wellness?
So the simple answer to that is it could be another name for mind-body wellness. I prefer the use of biopsychosocial because I think when it talks about mind-body, we forget how rooted in our biology that actually is. It feels more like emotional, physical connection, but it's so much bigger than that. And to be honest, the other really fancy name for it, which I decided not to write down because it gets even more confusing, is psychoneuroimmunology, which is really the interplay between all of these systems in our body, not one affecting the other, but a bi-relational communication between the systems at all times, meaning that our emotions trigger certain neurochemicals and peptides and things to release in our body, which causes different enzymes to be created or proteins to be created or whatever it might be, which affects our physical feelings, but also our physical being, our physical health. And then our physical health is so tied to our mental health. It's all just connected together along with our immune system, our gut, everything else. And so you can't separate the body into these systems because it doesn't work. And we see that all the time. This is why, you go to somebody who is a gastroenterologist and it might work, but half the time they only have some solutions for you. And unfortunately, it's often surgical because that's what they specialize in. And then your other symptoms kind of get ignored or not addressed in the way you want to. And I think that's what leaves people so frustrated, is that we've moved into this model of separating everything out. And really the work I do is about helping you understand how it's actually all connected and how treating every part in small ways together is actually the best way to get better.
Okay, so could you tell us a little bit before we dive in also, what drew you to this body of work? Why are you so passionate about this topic? And I don't know if it's your personal story, but could you maybe give us a little bit more context on why this is such an important topic for you?
I think for myself, it comes in a few different ways. For starters, I know myself, as many other women, there have been moments in my life where I've had something going on that definitely has roots in a few different areas. So stress is a great place for understanding to start here, I think. When we feel stressed, it affects so many things in our body. And I am a very A-type personality. I am, or at least I still am. I'm getting better at the polarity in A-type personalities, but I struggled a lot because the perfectionist part of me not only drew me to have a lot of struggles mentally because I never felt like things were good enough. I never felt like things were to the level of expertise I wanted. That whole strain that I put on myself mentally definitely had a really negative effect. But then it translated into a lot of physical symptoms as well. So I used to have a lot of migraines. And it's not to say that migraines are in your head or not a physical pain. They 100% are. But sometimes the stress we put on ourselves because of the neurochemicals that are released, because of the endorphins and adrenaline that is released constantly, that has a physiological effect, and that can affect things like our blood vessels. So if we are getting migraines that are related to blood flow, maybe it's also related to how tight our neck muscles are. And maybe our neck muscles are tight because we hold ourselves in a tight position trying to protect from stress. And we do it subconsciously. It's not something that we consciously recognize until it's pointed out to us. And that's, I think, the biggest struggle of dealing with it. So I definitely noticed a lot of these symptoms in myself, but then all the people I work with, I could feel their frustration when they're trying to work on an issue and nobody seems to understand or hear them. And I don't think that it's not actually that people didn't understand. It's that the way it's being communicated, they were only looking at it through one lens. And when you're only looking at it through one lens, then you can only get one solution. And so they never really felt like they were fully heard because it wasn't the solution they were looking for. It wasn't all-encompassing. And so the more I learned and the more I dove into, especially chronic pain, I really saw how connected it truly was with all these other systems in our body and how one thing cascades and trickles into another, into another, into another. And I'm like, why is nobody talking about this? If I understood this when I was younger, I might have made different choices.
Okay. All right. And so clear. And I think that things have evolved. And I think that there's a lot more awareness, like you said, around, first of all, I do think that many people haven't found solutions to, their struggles or their pain or their stress. And it's often because people are just looking at a slice of the pie. So I can only support also the I'm going to call it mind body wellness, but I hear what you're saying about that you like to be a little bit more specific and detailed about what you call it. So, and I know that one of the topics that we wanted to dive into was balance. And so can you just define for our listeners, how do you define balance? And why do you think it is such an important topic today in today's, world of the working woman?
Yeah, this is so important because I lived with zero balance for so many years and couldn't understand why I was unhappy, why I was exhausted, why I was gaining weight, why my health wasn't good. Like there were so many things. So balance to me is a scale. It is not a single definable thing. It is going to be contextual for everyone. So it's not my job to define balance for you. I can define balance for myself. And really, I need to understand for balance for me, it's there's two ends of the scale and we're constantly bouncing, typically, unfortunately, from one side to the other. The goal is to find ourselves coming towards the middle and hanging out in that middle section. Whether it's the middle of one side or the other, the goal is still to find our way towards the middle. And it's not about, there's going to be moments where we have to be on one side or the other, especially in work, like we have deadlines, we have moments in our life that are more stressful. Work is, has more that is asking from us. But the reality is when we can find balance, it will not drain us the same way. It will not burn us out the same way. We will make better decisions when we are in balance, especially in work. And it's interesting because this has been studied. And I think that there's this fear that if we're in too much balance, we're going to lose productivity. And in the workforce, that's actually been studied and proven that it's not true. In fact, some of the studies they actually did was when people got up and took a walk, like a 5-10 minute walk, they were actually more productive in the day. They got more done. They were more creative. They came up with better solutions, better ideas. And this is studies that have been done at Harvard. Like these are not small studies. They are larger studies that have been done. So I think that for when it comes to balance for a working woman, it really is the key to being more successful. And it's very counterintuitive at the beginning because it feels like you're taking away from productivity, and that taking away from productivity temporarily feels scary, and it feels like it's not aligned with being more successful, being that entrepreneur, being that professional working woman. And that's where we really need to change the mindset, and we really need to understand, and that's where the science and the research can be really helpful.
And so could you give me maybe two different examples of two different people that you've worked with or yourself and somebody else of what balance could look like So for you, like concretely, and I absolutely love the image of putting it on a scale, but how could that show up, or yeah, how could it manifest for two different people? Could you just give maybe two different examples?
So I always like to use myself because I was your picturesque, no balance kind of person. I mean, and here's the funny thing about the scale. Some people looking at me, depending on where they sit in the scale, might still see me as having no balance. So this is where it gets interesting. So for example, I've worked in different industries, and I actually originally went to school for hotel and restaurant management. That lifestyle is weekends, evening, holidays. That never bothered me. I don't have children, so it makes it easy that way. But I realized recently that working every single Saturday, even because now I still do it because it doesn't bother me. But I realized that it was taking away time from my partner and my relationship with him. And it's interesting because I work with a lot of professionals, a lot of really wealthy people who have built huge organizations. And when I was talking to my one client about how I don't think I'm going to be working Saturdays anymore because I don't want to go into this cycle of workaholism where it takes over and it gets too far that my partner starts to become resentful of my work. And he literally stopped and said, "Good for you. I really wish I had realized that sooner in my life, because I think my relationship with my wife would look differently if I did." And he said, "She definitely resents me for the times that I chose work over her. And I don't know if we could ever get to a place where it was before that happened." And so for me, I don't work Saturdays. I work the very odd Saturday for a client who really needs it kind of thing. But for the most part, I don't work Saturdays anymore. And that was my little step working towards the middle of finding balance.
Okay.
So for some people, again, that's like, well, but you still work a lot of hours during the week. Yeah, but for me, I took one step towards balance. So it doesn't have to be great leaps. And this is the biggest misconception we have, is we think balance and like finding balance has to be us sitting meditating for 30 minutes a day and, doing these retreats or whatever it might be. And that's not it. It's the small steps that will get you there.
Okay. No, I love the small step idea, because I think also when we look at it like that, it makes it also much easier. And like breaking it down into bite-sized bits makes doing something or changing our behaviors or making a decision so much easier. So I love the idea of taking, a step towards finding that. Okay, great. And could you discuss a little bit, your point of view on the relationship between balance and decision making? So how does a balanced approach lead to better choices, both personally and in a professional context?
Yeah, so this is interesting because I think when you're a go-getter in the workforce, your lack of balance sometimes can lead you to make decisions too quickly or without good thought. I am definitely guilty of this. I am kind of an all-in, okay, let's just do it. Let's jump at it. Let's get it done. I get excited. And I don't ever sit back and wait. And it's detrimental sometimes. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes that's what you need. And this is where it's a scale, right? It's not always going to be that you have to stop. Sometimes it's great that you jump in right away. However, when you sit back, it allows you to reflect. And when you're in a really heightened state of emotional creativity, excitement, whatever it might be, it's not always all parts of your brains communicating together, especially depending on what it is that you're going into. If it's something that even has some fear to it, your amygdala might be playing more of a part than you want it to be. And your amygdala is not your most intelligent part of your brain. So part of the balance piece is giving yourself, when you're working with children, sometimes it's that counting to 5 before you respond. It's the same idea in business. And it's funny that we don't do this. Whether it's you have a friend or a family member that you can kind of bounce ideas off of, or you can literally sit and do a 5-minute meditation about, okay, if I make this choice, what does that look like? What are my other choices? If I have 3 different paths, what do those paths really look like for me? And which path do I feel like actually aligns with myself as well? So when you're finding balance in decision making, part of that is also allowing your brain the time to absorb the information and then process it. Interestingly, naps have been one of the best ways for your brain to process information. And they've done this study with people who are studying for tests, exams, that kind of thing. Taking a nap, doing an intense study period, and then taking a 15, 20-minute nap, and then coming back to it, your retention of that information is way better. And again, professionally, we look at like something like napping, we'd be like, are you insane? Like, I have to work. I'm not going to nap. But what if that was the difference between you making a good decision or a decision that maybe doesn't ruin you, but really takes it 3 or 5 years longer to get to where you want to go?
Okay. So I think also what I'm hearing is that balance is it's also taking a breather, taking a step back and not rushing into something. Would you say that that is something that you would see in a lot of people is kind of just that go, go, go? Because I'm also that type A personality. I'm an action taker. So I'm just curious about when we're more aware also that we're like that, is having that time to breathe, that pause, that time to kind of digest. What you're saying is that it actually really improves our decision-making process.
Yes.
And because there's also things going on in the brain happening also when we're making a conscious decision to have more balance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it goes back to our all or nothing personalities, right? We get a dopamine hit from being ultra productive. And so that drives us to be more ultra productive. But the problem is you can lose sight of some of the creativity pieces, especially I find, at least for myself, I would not say I'm necessarily super artistic, but I would say I'm creative. However, I can't allow myself to be creative if I'm task-oriented all the time, right? And it's not to say that task orientation is not good. It's really good, but not all the time. When you are only task-oriented, you leave no space in your schedule to be creative. None. And this is where that's where the balance is. So again, like they've done studies. There was one, I think, in the Netherlands where they took 10-minute guided meditations and had people do creative problem solving and coming up with creative business ideas post 10-minute guided meditations. And they were way more creative because their brain literally had the time to do that. Whereas again, when we're just task after task after task, it's funny. It's the same idea as when you're telling somebody to stop crying. That doesn't work. It also doesn't tell your brain, okay, be creative now. No, that's not how our brain works. You have to leave space for it. This is where it doesn't have to be a big activity, right? Like it's stuff you can do at your desk, at work, or on your lunch, on your break. Take breaks. That's the other piece, right? Take breaks. Like actually take 10 minutes. The world's not going to end.
Yeah.
Unless you're literally a surgeon in emergency, you do not deal with life and death most of the time.
Yeah.
So taking 10 minutes is not going to change the outcome of the event. And often, if nothing else, research has shown us it might actually improve the outcome of the event.
I absolutely love that. Because it's something I think that I've realized. So this is more of a personal reflection, but I did not put words on it until you said it. You get a dopamine hit from being productive. And I would completely agree that was me for a very long time until, and I deliberately, because I have built-in balance also to my life and have deliberately built in morning walks. And that is the time that I am absolutely the most creative. I have 50 million ideas, and it's because you're outside and it's fresh air and it's a completely different context. And so thank you for putting words on that. I think it's something I'm also going to use at a later time because I work with a lot of people also who are ultra productive and productivity is important. So thank you for naming that concept.
It's a hard loop to break. Like I get it because there's a physiological response to that as well as emotional, right? And the other piece that is a really hard one to address and deal with in that envelope is the fact that being productive gives us a sense of self-worth. And you see most people when they retire or lose their job suddenly, and that was their identity, they don't know who they are. They go into a deep depression because they deeply feel they don't have any self-worth if they are unable to do the thing they thought they were supposed to do. And that's where it becomes really dangerous as well, right? Is we are more than our work. Our work can be important, our work can be valuable, but we are more than our work.
Yeah. No, I love that. And how do you think then, like within a team situation, how can leaders cultivate that? Cultivate a culture of balance and, of course, without compromising on performance goals and revenue goals and, you know, whatever objectives have been set. But how can leaders cultivate that culture?
I think that providing their employees with evidence that shows that, like, when you take that 5-minute walk around the block and come back into the office, that is beneficial to you. I think that leaders always have to lead. That's a big piece, right? That's the reality. Is it can't be a do as I say, not as I do. But I think that there's still fear in the employees that they aren't going to get the work done. It's not going to be as productive. It's not going to be as good. They're going to be seen as slacking off. That's the big fear too, right? So I think if it's built in there that we explain, hey, look, this is what the research says about creativity, about productivity, about overall wellness, general health. We care, and we care so much that we're going to encourage you to implement 2 things. And maybe that's part of your planning process is when you do your goals and you talk about your KPIs or whatever it might be with your staff, you also talk about, okay, cool, what's your 2 things you're doing for yourself this week? And what's one daily thing you're going to do for your boost your creativity? Maybe don't talk about it in the terms of mental health because that can become really sticky. But maybe talk about it in terms of like, we're looking to boost creativity. We're looking to reduce stress so that the brain can work better. What are you implementing today? And then you have to implement it for yourself as well. And when that person does implement it and it's not at the right time, because that is going to happen on occasion, it's key to not reprimand them for that. It's important that you say, hey, I saw that you took your 5 minutes to go for your walk. I'm really glad you did that. How'd you feel afterwards? Oh, I felt great. I had this. Okay, great. Cool. I feel like the timing of that was not perfect. I know we're still working on this. Maybe, thinking about this. But it's important that you let them know that you saw that they did that. You heard the outcome of what came from that, because it has to be a positive thing. And then you kind of slip in there like, oh, by the way, let's think about where else we can do this or how else we can do this.
Okay. So definitely leading by example, encouraging. And also, I love what you just said about reminding people what the benefits are. And it's also in the vocabulary that you use. It's how you talk about it. And because I think that it's also when people see the benefit for themselves, they're more likely to continue with the behavior. And so I think that encouragement is really, really important by their management. Okay, great. And also, so I want to talk about your book, The Middle Path. Okay, so first of all, respect you greatly for writing a book on this topic, which I think everybody can hear how passionate you are about it. And what I love is it's not only about professional achievement, but it's also about personal well-being. Because up until now, we've talked about a lot of this in a professional environment. But how can this concept of balance really impact also personal well-being? If you could elaborate a little bit on that and then tell us about your book a little bit more in detail.
For sure. So the biggest thing, we'll say the lowest hanging fruit of personal health and well-being and finding balance is reducing stress. People do not understand how impactful stress long-term is on the body. It is the number one driver of most chronic diseases and conditions and pain. It is. And it's not because it's in your head. I hate that narrative. It's because your nervous system is overtaxed. Your nervous system is constantly overdriven and it starts to break down because it can't do everything. It's holding a lot. Your nervous system is trying to make sure you blink, breathe, pump blood to the right areas, move your body. Like, it's doing a lot when you're not stressed. let alone you add in other things where it's like, okay, well, now we have to put this into hyperdrive, and now we have to do this, and now we have to do this. Things will start to fall because it cannot carry everything. And it's interesting because when you start to reduce stress, your blood pressure goes down. Like, it's amazing. That happens so quickly. Just by taking 5 deep breaths, your blood pressure will go down. It does not have to be mind-altering ideas. It can be really simple things. When you're in a stressed state, your gut does not function the same way. The amount of people who have chronic stress, burnout, trauma, and they have gut issues, it's so correlated. It's not even funny, because your gut will not secrete the gastric juices it needs, the enzymes to break things down. So you're not going to be digesting your food as well. You're going to have possibly cramps, constipation, diarrhea, whatever it might look like for you. When you start reducing stress, that starts to get better. It gives your body an opportunity to heal. And so finding balance, again, let's say that like you're stressed 90% of your day. If you bring that down to percent, that's 5% you've given your body to help it heal. It is not going to be earth-shattering, but it's going to get you on the road to getting better. Your body can only do it for so long. And you see chronic pain is a big one because your muscles, your nerves, everything cannot function the same way when it's overtaxed. It can't heal from that small little strain the same way because it's busy trying to do other things to keep you alive.
Okay. Yeah, I love one of the things that I've picked up from this conversation also is keeping things simple. I think a lot of times people overcomplicate it, think that they can't make changes, that there won't be any impact. But, you've talked about just breathing for 5 minutes, taking a nap, taking a walk. Those are very simple things that can have a huge impact on your physical and your mental well-being, is what I'm hearing. So keep it simple is what I'm taking away.
And I think that sometimes people think if it's a complex issue, it must have a complex solution. And that's not correct when it comes to biology in your body. Often very simple solutions are the solutions to more complex issues. It just might take a little bit to get there. So in my book, that's really what I talk about. We go through a little bit at the beginning about the history, but then we talk a lot about the pieces of, harm reduction. So I think of actually balance as really a harm reduction strategy. If you're eating 20 chocolate bars a day and you want to be healthier, eat 18. Like, it's still better than 20.
Yeah.
And we don't look at things that way. Instead, we put a lot of guilt and shame on it. So really a lot of this is talking about what balance looks like in all different aspects of your life: physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, all of that. And then there's also practical tips in there, so you don't have to, do a lot to make good solutions. It doesn't always take some complex solution, right? There's a lot of really simple things that you can start working on to get yourself into a more balanced place.
So for everybody listening, you'll have the link. But tell us specifically, so who do you work with? Who do you help? And maybe one recommendation from your book that you could give to the listeners.
So I really work with a lot of people, I would say, who are kind of type A, struggling with finding balance, as well as I do a lot of work actually with trauma and addictions and that kind of thing as well, because it's also hugely linked with not having balance. So that's really, I do work with an addiction treatment center. I've done work with a food addiction community, and I do different educations and that kind of thing, whether it's health or mental related. But in my book, the biggest takeaway, I think, is awareness. So awareness, it gets talked about a lot, but the value really is the fact that if you do not notice that you're doing something, you can't change it. And this is echoed across so many things. So I like the simple examples that you can see. So if you are limping when you're walking and you don't notice, you can't fix it. Whereas if somebody goes, hey, did you know that you always take a shorter step with your left leg? You're like, oh, I do? And then you start to think about it, you're like, oh yeah, I guess I do. And then you can address it. If you have areas of your life that you feel are unbalanced, for starters, start looking at it. What is it that really makes it unbalanced? Is it that you feel you have a lack of time? What is it you feel you don't have as far as resources to make yourself balanced? Why do you feel like you're not allowed to have balance? Because sometimes that's what it is you don't feel like you're worthy of being able to take a break. A lot of people with children often use their children as a reason not to find balance because they say, well, I have to do this and that for the kids. I was not shown balance by my parents. And so to find balance, I had to figure it out on my own. When you're a parent, your children will watch you and they will learn by what you do. So if you don't ever model balance for them, how are they ever supposed to learn balance? And it goes back to, you can tell your child, balance is important. Balance is important. But if you never do it, they'll watch you and say, okay, but you never do it. Like, why would we care?
Yeah.
And so it really is, if you do balance, if you become aware, then your children will be way more aware as well.
And okay, so my last question is, would you recommend to somebody that they start in one area, like, I don't know, financial or physical or at work or at home, or is kind of addressing several areas at the same time more efficient or easier? What would you recommend?
So for all the A-type personalities out there who want to just do this perfectly the first time, I'm going to get balance done perfectly. If we're going to do it perfectly, I'm going to be an A+ student at balance. Yeah, you've already missed the point. It's okay. It's about starting really small. I think, where's your most painful area that you really feel you're out of balance, right? What is the area that is so painfully aware that you need to make a change and you just don't know where to start? That's where you start. Is, okay, I'm working 80 hours a week and I feel like I'm unable to do less. Why? Where can you do less? Why can't you say no? You know, is it something where you can just take a day off a month, right? Maybe you work until 7, not 7:30. Maybe you ask your spouse, partner, friend to literally cut you off from your technology. Maybe you put blocks on your emails so that you can't get emails past a certain time.
Okay.
Find the area that pains you the most. And if it is wellness, fitness, that kind of thing, it's interesting. People will come and say, I want to start working out 3 times a week. I'm like, great. How many times are you working out now? They're like, none. I'm like, okay, well then 3 times isn't realistic. I want you to you have a stationary bike. That's what you want to get on more often. Great. Every day you're going to do 1 minute on your stationary bike. Why 1 minute? Because you don't even have to get changed. You don't have to change your shoes. You don't have to get a water bottle. You don't have to do anything. You just have to physically sit on it and start pedaling. And if you do more than a minute, fabulous. There's no extra credit stickers. The goal is 1 minute. If you do more, fabulous, but you're going to do 1 minute. You can commit to that because it's small. Okay. Usually those small goals are what snowball into bigger goals.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So thank you. This has been fascinating. I think it is such an important topic because I think just so much of our suffering is preventable. But like you said, we have to be aware. We have to make some kind of change. You know, it's like Einstein's famous phrase, you know, we do the same things over and over and expect a different result. You know, that just doesn't happen. You have to make some kind of small change for change to happen. So I completely adhere with your philosophy. Is there anything else that you would like to add as we close out our conversation?
I think the only thing I want to add is just be kind to yourself while you're doing this. It is hard work, even though it's small steps.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Viktoria. Again, you know, I would encourage all of our listeners to check out her book, The Middle Path. I will link below. I will also link where you can find her online, and wishing everybody a fantastic day. Thanks, Viktoria.
Thanks.
Hang on. Up.